Hello everyone, it's Mystic Juicer here with episode 2 of Getting Good at Yomi. Today we're going to cover when you shouldn't combo. So to explain what I mean there, when you've hit with an attack, anything except a can't combo attack, if you've hit with a throw, if you've successfully won combat with a dodge, you now have the option of following up your combat reveal with an additional or a series of additional combat cards. So in episode 1 we covered when we should be attacking, when we should be throwing. So essentially when we have good damage off of an attack or a throw. A lot of the beginning players that I see struggle. One of the harder things to learn is when you've hit somebody with an attack, to fight back on the temptation to follow up with every single combat card you possibly can play into the biggest, most damaging, most intimidating possible combo you can land. In very many cases, it's actually far better to hold yourself back, still deal some damage, but not to go completely crazy. And these are the kinds of, I'm going to just give a bunch of rules of thumb here, like last episode, guiding principles. Again, anything that works is a good idea. So if you have success working counter to these strategies, then that's great. But these are just kind of general principles of good and especially conservative play. So when should you reconsider comboing after initial combat reveal win? First and most important, and this is the thing that is the most key thing to take away, is don't combo if it's going to put you at a low, very low or especially very low hand. And this is especially true very early in the game. So I'm talking about, you've got 7 cards in hand, you hit with a combo, you play 6 cards, and you're down, in an extreme case, down to 0 cards in hand, except for the next card that you're going to draw next turn. Okay? Don't be a top deck warrior. Do not try this at home. This is an experts only move. only very specifically a good idea. So to keep in mind why this is a bad idea and why you should fight back on this temptation, remember that your damage potential is higher the higher your hand is, and the lower your hand is. So what you're doing when you empty your hand or reduce yourself to 2 or 3 cards in hand is saying, for the next couple of turns, even if I win combat, my damage is going to be very, very low. And if your opponent is at high hand, every combat that they win, they're going to be able to deal more damage to you than you are, on balance. So especially early in the game, especially, the first attack you hit with, fight back on the urge of going down to 4 or 3 or 2 cards in hand. Because what that's going to set up is a series of combat reveals, a series of turns where your opponent has way bigger payoff on any combat win. And is going to take way less punishment on every combat loss. So you may feel great having dealt that huge 30 damage combo, but you'll find that you will probably lose the rest of the game, especially if your opponent is able to exploit your hand, the size of your hand. So, to reiterate, reconsider comboing if it's going to put you at very low hand. And rule of thumb I would say is definitely 3 cards qualifies. 4 and 5 isn't okay, it's kind of a middling hand. Second situation where you should reconsider comboing. Reconsider whether you're going to combo if, as a part of that combo, you are depriving yourself of a necessary combat option. So what I mean by this is, If comboing is going to leave you with a hand with no attacks, or no throws, or no blocks, or no dodges, but more importantly, I would say in order of things that you want to have at least one of in hand, you want to have at least one block in hand. Remember, blocks are the tool that you're going to need to build up a scary hand and be able to threaten that 13 card hand, that huge damage combo. So you definitely want to reconsider something that's going to leave you with no blocks in hand. You're also going to want to reconsider leaving yourself with no throws in hand, because while you'll have attack and block options, and possibly dodge options, your opponent, if they know that you have no or low throws, can safely block. If they go block-block, if you both go block-block, they don't take any damage. If you start dodging, that's even better for them. They're building a hand while you're not. And if you attack them, the block is going to win, giving them more cards, more options, more potential damage and payoff of their next combat win. So I would definitely see keep a block in hand, keep a throw in hand if at all possible. Third thing to keep in mind, or third situation where you want to reconsider comboing, is if the combo isn't going to be lethal, so if it's not going to kill your opponent, or it's not going to set you up for a lethal potential combo or combat reveal next turn. So if you're in a situation where you potentially put your super combo into effect, you go whole hog, you take it to the limit, and then next turn you don't have any options that neither by dodge nor by throw nor by attack can you kill your opponent, especially in the late game. You want to set yourself up so that either you've got lethal this turn or you've got lethal next turn, especially when it starts getting down to that wire. So consider that in your when you're choosing whether to follow up or not. Especially true. That's especially important. So this idea of having either lethal this turn or lethal next turn is especially important because in the late game you will have tended to get to a situation where either your opponent or you is at a lower hand size. So in that that kind of dangerous 5-4-3 cards in hand situation. So it's very important that you don't put yourself in a situation. A small hand late game isn't as bad as a small hand early game, but it can still be quite bad. Especially if it falls under another situation like not having one of your combat options, like a dodge, a throw, or an attack. Reconsider comboing if your opponent bluffs. So, you've won combat, and then your opponent has played a face-down card. Whether or not it's a joker, keep in mind that you and your opponent both played a combat card. That's one card you've both quote-unquote risked this turn that you're going to lose, with rare exception, character-specific exceptions. And now, before any other decision happens, they have also wagered a second card. Regardless of whether it's a joker or not, they're going down 2 cards, and you're only losing 1 in this situation, and you're dealing some kind of damage. Unless you've won with a dodge, of course. But even then, if you've won combat with a dodge, that dodge, while it deals no damage, if your opponent bluffs, is going to get rid of 2 of their cards. So keep that in mind when you're evaluating things. Remember, having a large hand in the early and mid game, and if you can get to the late game with a large hand, and with a hand advantage against your opponent, that can be incredibly, incredibly good for you. And as much as possible, you should try to do it. So before you follow up into that what may or may not be a joker, take a moment, evaluate the pros and cons of whether it's a joker or not. So if you follow this up and it is a joker, does your opponent have card advantage now? Have they been playing in such a way that it indicates they've got a terrible hand? So you're potentially giving them 2 cards that is going to get them out of that situation, make them much more threatening. What's their pattern? Have they been honest with their jokers? Have they only played a face down card when it's been a joker? Ask yourself those questions before you follow up. And then finally, so the last of these kind of principles is if you've hit with a knockdown move. So most characters' throws, normal throws, are going to knock down your opponent, so long as you end the combo there, if you don't follow them up. If you follow them up with something and your combo doesn't end with a move that knocks down, they're going to remain standing at the end of combat. And there are some special moves and some normals that some characters have that also have the knockdown property. So knockdown is very good. It puts you in an advantaged state, right? Your opponent can't dodge, and their blocks are much weaker. So getting knocked down, obviously very, very nice. The other thing too is if you're following it up, especially if they've played a card face down, but even in general principles, if you're following it up, you'd better be sure that the damage that you're getting is worth more than the knockdown. So if you throw and then follow it up with a 2 for 2 damage, don't. Go back in time, slap yourself. Don't do that stuff. Unless that is lethal or setting up lethal next turn, and it would be impossible to set up lethal next turn without following up with that 2. Keep the 2 in hand, take the knockdown, move on to an advantaged situation in the next turn. So on the flip side, so to put it another way, consider playing into, or because face downs and jokers have come into this a little bit, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about when you would actually follow up a combo when your opponent, specifically when your opponent has played a card face down. So you're potentially playing into a joker. So these principles obviously apply if an opponent doesn't face down, but when they do, keep these in mind whether you're evaluating whether you should be playing into it or not. So first of all, obviously, is they've been bluffing a ton. They have been consistently playing face down cards that haven't been jokers in your sets or in your past history. Then it's a fair idea to start playing into those cards more often. In a situation like that, the reason they're doing that is either, one, they just really like playing cards face down, they're not valuing those cards or having that additional card advantage as much as they should be, probably. Or 2, they've been getting away with it against you. So show them that you're not completely terrified of playing into a joker and follow through occasionally. Other times you should consider playing into a face down if you have a straight. Because normal straights will give you an ace, whether or not they deal damage. So as soon as you've got a 3-card straight, a 4-card straight, 5-card straight, you're going to get aces at the end of that turn, whether you deal damage or not. It's often worth it just to get the aces. Remember, let's pretend you've hit with a 2, okay? So you're drawing a card. Let's pretend you're hit with a 2 and you're following it up with a 3 and a 4. So you've hit with the 2, you're going to draw a card for that. And you've got a straight, so you're drawing an ace. So you've played 3 cards, but you're getting 2 cards back. Okay, so you're not reducing the size of your hand. Always crucial to hammer that home. If you take nothing away from these videos, other than the fact that having high cards in hand is good, I'm fine with that. This is one of the most valuable lessons you can learn. But so straights are very, very good that way, because they can, and they are not as damaging to your hand size, and in fact can improve your hand quality in terms of the damage output, the potential damage output of your hand, especially if the straight gives you, for instance, you're a character that only has a double ace move or a 4 ace move or a 3 ace move, and it gives you that second, third, or fourth ace. So if you have a straight, consider playing into a face down. Consider following up that combo. If you have lethal, consider following that combo up. So this is such an important lesson, in fact, that there's a saying on fantasystrike.com. It's basically, if lethal, then lethal. So there's that particular players that really follow through on that philosophy, or really side heavily towards following that philosophy of, if you have one combat and you have lethal this turn, even if the person face downs, go for it. The other concept too, going back a little bit to when you shouldn't do this, you should do it if you have either lethal this turn or lethal the next turn, if you follow through. So that situation where you're following up a throw with a 2, getting rid of that knockdown, well, if it may be worth it if the next turn you have a lethal damage off of several of these options. So it gets better. Following up a throw with a 2 or a low damage card gets better the more of your options become lethal when you do that. So if you give up knockdown and deal some additional damage, and you only have lethal off of attack next turn, that's okay. If you have lethal off of attack and throw, that's great. And if you have lethal off attack, throw, and dodge, that's amazing. Go for it. Do it. It may not work out. Again, if they face down, we're talking about when you should follow through, even if they face down. It may not work out, but it's worth the risk. The other concept, or the other time you should be okay with playing into a face down card, is if you're still going to have card advantage, even if it's a joker. So you're in a situation where they're at 4 cards, you're at 13, and you're thinking about whether you should follow through with an additional 2 cards for some extra damage. You know, they're still going to be at 6, and you're going to be at whatever, let's say 10. Right? You still have, they're not in as bad a position as they were before, but you're still in a very commanding situation. And that's going to do it for today, so keep those principles in mind. So just to reiterate really quick, so reconsider comboing if it's going to put you at a low hand, if it's going to deprive you of a necessary option, especially a block, if it's not going to get you lethal this turn or the next turn, if your opponent bluffs, or if you've won combat with a knockdown move, and you're not going to be able to knock down at the end of your combo. Thanks again for listening. I'll add some links to the next episodes when they appear, and enjoy yourself some Yomi.